For over 30 years, the team at Hope Store New Beginning Center, along with our clients and community partners, have been building lives without violence in Dallas and Collin counties. If you're in immediate physical danger, please call 911. If you need shelter or would like to talk to someone about receiving our other free services, please call our 24-hour hotline at 972-276-0057 in English or Spanish. At Hope Store New Beginning Center, we offer free trauma-informed services for those affected by domestic abuse, battering intervention and prevention services for those who have abused their partners in the past, and free community education services for any community group or organization. Domestic abuse is a human rights issue that affects a third of all Texans. We empower victims, perpetrators, and community members to live in safety and foster healthy relationships. Please call our 24-hour hotline for help or visit hdnbc.org to learn more about our services. And don't forget to follow us on social media. Hope Store New Beginning Center, building lives without violence.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me. I'm just about to turn on my camera so y'all can see my lovely face. And hello everyone. So thank you so much for being here today. My name is Jose Romero. I'm one of the bilingual community education facilitators here at Hope Store New Beginning Center. And I see some familiar names in the chat. So just to throw out a quick disclaimer that I have done this presentation before with somebody else. So it might be more of the same information that you heard the last time I did this presentation. But for everyone else who hasn't seen this presentation, thank you so much for being here. That's going to be the main focus today, teaching interpersonal skills to children. And just real quick, can everyone hear me? Did everyone hear the video play nicely and everything? Was the audio on point at least? Okay, awesome. Because we were having that issue last time. So I was making sure I got on like 40, 50 minutes before the start of this. And I was making sure everything was working because I didn't want to have any technical issues pop up while we were doing this, but good to hear that that was all ironed out. So hopefully it stays working just fine so we can actually get through the entire thing without any fires popping up. But I am part of the education department, and at the beginning of that introduction video, it did cover a lot of the services that Hope Store New Beginning Center does offer to our clients. And I'll touch on that a bit more in detail towards the end if we have time for that, because there are some individuals here that I don't recognize the name. So you might be curious and wondering what other services we provide when it comes to that. But we'll get to that towards the end. And you're going to see my head turns and shifts. It's because I have multiple screens going on. I'm trying to monitor some of the other questions and the panels and everything that might come up. So if you just see me turn around, that's what that is. It's just being all technical here. But I'm going to give a quick reminder that CEUs are available for this webinar. So we do get a track record of that. But if you do require CEUs at the end, there's going to be a survey. Just make sure you fill that out. It's going to have a few questions based on this webinar, and we are going to get those CEUs as quick as we can, get those out to you. Okay. But our main focus today and what our objectives are going to be is we're going to identify poor interpersonal skills in children and methods that we can apply to help them in that aspect. We're going to learn ways that we can start a conversation with children, because we know as they start getting older, those conversations become much more harder to actually start, because topics like sexual activity, substance use come into play, and it's just harder to start that conversation when we haven't established a relationship with a child at the young age. So we're going to talk about how we can actually address that with teens as they're older and make that transition to that conversation and opening that door much easier. And we're also going to talk about some skills to help children to solve conflict, because no one's immune to conflict. It's going to happen at all different age groups. I mean, it happens to me, it happens to you, and we're just going to address how we can give children those skills so they can resolve them on their own. Now, my personal disclaimer when it comes to this topic, because usually when I do presentations, I'm at least very, like, I'm aware on the topic that I'm speaking of, and I wanted to put that out there right before we start that I'm not a parent. I don't have any children, but there was a point where I was taking care of my niece for about 5 years, and I was able to pick up a lot of the techniques that we're going to talk about today from that. It was a whole learning experience. It was hard at times. It isn't easy raising a child and trying to make sure that their upbringing is a good one. So it was all trial and error. It was a very hard learning experience for me because I was still pretty young when I was taking care of her. So I was trying to balance the two. But I'm going to share with y'all some of the things that I know that worked for me, and I've had others tell me this, like, hey, this is really good feedback that you're giving us that's really accessible to us, that we can apply just on the day-to-day basis. So just wanted to put that out there real quick. But just to get started, what are interpersonal skills? And this is how we exchange the thoughts, the ideas, the emotions and feelings with other individuals that we do. And we technically, it's mostly done face to face, but it can be done through technology, just like we're doing right now. And with current events going on, COVID-19 and everything, and schools that switch to online classes, it takes a toll. So we're also actually going to talk about the barrier that technology plays. Well, I'll be the first one to tell you that I love technology. Like, I can't live without it. Like, if you were to see my studio right now, you see I have technology everywhere, and it has its pros, but it also has its cons, its negatives, because it does act as that barrier for children when it comes to practicing those interpersonal skills. But we'll talk about that a bit later as we progress through the presentation. But one of the ways these interpersonal skills are very important to children is because they help them communicate with their peers. They help them establish a friendship with these peers. They're going to be going to school. They're going to be interacting with these children around them. So they're going to get the opportunity to practice those interpersonal skills with face-to-face with other children. And what they're doing with those skills is they're building those lasting relationships with their peers. I have friends from elementary school that I still stay in touch, because when we were younger, we made that connection. We were constantly, like, from first grade all the way to fifth grade, we were in some class together. So you were able to establish a connection, the trust. And now as an adult, when I'm going through something rough, a rough patch in my life, I have that support system that I can turn to. So that's what children are eventually going to do with those interpersonal skills. They're going to build those connections with peers around them that establish that trust, that bond that they can. Those are going to be those peers that they turn to when they don't feel like they can turn to a parent. Because as a parent, you ideally, you want to keep your child out of harm's way. You don't want anything to happen to them. And that's how I was with my niece. I didn't want anything bad to ever happen to her. But sadly, that sometimes is out of our control, especially when it comes to those school settings, or as a teenagers, when they're hanging out with their friends, it becomes much harder to control those aspects of their life. But if they've built up that support system, those friends that they have that positive communication with, those are going to be the first individuals that these children are turning into their support system. So if they've established a good support system, they're going to have positive feedback from the support system. That's going to stop them from doing irrational decisions, like probably trying substance, and then on top of that, driving. It's going to stop situations like that. So that's why these interpersonal skills are very important in situations like that. It starts that friendship and connection with others. But second, one of the other things I tell my students when I do, or back when I used to do these presentations in front of high school students, I tell them, one of the worst things you can do is leave that classroom with a question and just not addressing it, just not asking that question, because you've lost an opportunity there to learn something, to learn about that topic as well, because that's how we learn. If you don't know something, you ask a question, and then all of a sudden, bam, a new information that you've just gained. And when you give the children that confidence because they build up those interpersonal skills, it's going to give them that confidence to ask those questions as well, whatever that question may be. And it might not be just that, let's say I did have that one student in that classroom that asked a question, and there's going to be another kid in the back of the classroom that probably had the same question, but they weren't confident enough to answer that question. So not only is that confidence helping the child directly, it's helping those around them as well, which is another reason why they're very important. But then children grow. You can't stop them from growing. They start growing, they start hitting their teen years, and eventually some of them, they're going to end up in relationships. They're going to want money to take their date, take their significant other on a date, go to the movies, and they're probably going to want to have a part-time job so they can have that source of income. So those interpersonal skills help in that workplace setting. It helps them avoid situations where they go into an interview, and let's say their body language isn't on point. So if you're talking in an interview and you have that teenager just slouching and not making eye contact and just distracted, that shows that potential employer that, okay, this individual isn't really that interested in this position, or this isn't the kind of qualities we want in an individual working here. So again, a parent in that situation would want to tell their child, this is what you need to do, sit up straight, do this, do that. It's like when they respond, make sure to give enough time so they can ask questions. And it's going to help in that situation. It's going to help them present themselves better. It's going to help them show and keep up their appearance and everything, because they want to send out those nonverbal cues, because we know that interpersonal skills, most of the time they are verbal, but we can show them as nonverbal cues as well. And we'll touch more on that as well as we move forward. But let's say now they have a career. This teenager went from part-time job, they graduated and they're in a career now. Odds are they're not going to work alone. They're most likely going to work as a part of as a team member. They're going to be working with other individuals, and these interpersonal skills are going to help in that setting as well, because we're all going to collectively come together and try and solve the same problem. And that's how we want to equip these kids, so when they get to that stage, they're able to work together with other individuals in their career. And last but not least, it helps in that relationship when they're trying to establish one. Depending on who you ask, a relationship usually requires a lot of communication. It requires back and forth, getting to know each other. But if you ask some of my high school students, they'll just tell you, if we just swipe the right way and we match up, that's a relationship. But ideally, what experience will tell us is like, yes, you need to establish that positive form of communication. So it'll help in that relationship. It'll help establish that positive communication, how we address problems. Are we just going to blow a gasket when we have a disagreement, when me and my significant other, like if I don't like what she's saying, am I just going to go blow up in her face about it? No, of course not. So it helps with positive conflict resolution, helps with communication in that relationship that'll keep it going instead of just destroying it then and there because there's not proper communication. So it's just, there's different many ways in a child's life where these interpersonal skills come into play and help them out as they start growing older. And then these skills that I have up here, which are simple ones like eye contact, smiling, pausing at the right times during conversation. These are what are considered the minor social skills, because these are some of the skills that they pick up over time. Again, when they're going to school, when they're at a job with other peers, as they get older, these you pick up over time and you perfect them over time. You learn to see that, okay, if I'm having a conversation with this individual, I should make eye contact. I need to leave enough room for me to ask a question, for them to answer. And then if they ask a question, I'm not just gonna sit there quietly and not reply. So these are those skills that come over time that really, when it comes to teaching those interpersonal skills, these should be less of a focus because it's going to be around them. They're going to practice them constantly. So I always say, when it comes to these, focus on the interpersonal skills that you see as really important for this individual, for this child that you want to focus on. So these I would recommend just setting aside. Maybe if it is that one of these is maybe causing a big issue, yes, address them. But ideally, they will pick these up over time. So I wouldn't stress too much on these. And here we have an example of several different nonverbal cues. And again, a lot of this goes back to how they present themselves with appearance. How do they present themselves in front of others? Are they going to show up to that interview with with ripped jeans, a band t-shirt, and their hair all messy? Probably not. But if they do, that is a learning experience, because they'll see, okay, maybe I wasn't presentable enough at this presentation, or at this interview rather. And they're all learning experiences. Every situation we go through is a learning experience, and children will pick up on that as well. They're going to see that maybe some situations like that won't work. Maybe if somebody's sharing some very sensitive topic and I decide to laugh, that's most likely going to be frowned upon. So they're going to pick up, it's like, okay, people clearly didn't like when I laughed when they were sharing sad news with me. So it's all learning experience. Those nonverbal cues, again, they're going to pick them up over time. So again, these are some of the ones I wouldn't stress too much about, but we'll move forward. Want to have a list of the green flags, because when it comes to kids and teaching them those interpersonal skills, a lot of the times they just hear the negative. They're like, well, you should have done this instead. No, this is what you need to do. And we don't take time to acknowledge the positive that they're doing. So if they're doing a good job with, let's say they're sharing their iPad with their sibling, praise them for little situations like that. Just let them know, reinforce that positive behavior. It's like, let them know, that's really good of you. Thank you so much for sharing with your sister, with your brother. I was like, I appreciate that. So just let them know that you see that positive behavior, because it helps build up self-esteem in these kids. And it helps them realize that, okay, I am doing this the right way. This is what is socially acceptable. And it's just going to continue that positive cycle. When it comes to active listening, this was one of the harder skills I had to solve with my niece, because she would be in my presence when I talked to her, but then she wouldn't really remember what I was talking to her because she wasn't paying attention. So what I did in that situation is I started bringing out some of the Disney books, small little books, and I would read maybe one or two of the pages. And I would ask her, hey, so what color shoe did Belle have? Or what color was her dress? And then she'd be able to tell me, oh, she was wearing that yellow dress and it was very fluffy, because she'll look at the images, and she was able to constantly show me that she was actively listening. And I would praise that. Again, I would let her know, this is really good, like, good job. And again, you're building up their confidence, that self-esteem. It's giving them a little boost in that they need, because I mean, who doesn't like getting compliments like that, or just getting positive comments? It makes you feel good, right? And that's what we want to address with them. But then we also have those red flags, the red flags that let you know, it's like, uh-oh, there might be something here. Those early red flags that let you know maybe we need to address something like this. And one of the more common ones would be problems making and keeping close friends, because again, like we discussed earlier, those are those children, those friendships that they make, that is their support system. And if a child is growing up and they don't establish that support system around them as they get older, and let's say maybe they end up in since I do work for an agency that helps victims of domestic violence, let's say they end up in an abusive relationship and they don't have a support system, who are they going to turn to at that time? So that only helps the perpetrator isolate them, and it keeps them away from those resources. So you want to make sure that they have that support system on their own, that they have those friends that they can turn to, because otherwise, again, it's feeding into potential isolation that only benefits the perpetrators should that situation arise, and hopefully it doesn't. But poor listening skills, again, this is, like I said, with my niece, this was something that was a real struggle. And I knew I had to address this, and I had her teachers mention it too, that in classes, she sometimes wasn't paying attention. It was only the classes that she was interested in because in her art classes, one of the ones I remember that she had no interest in whatsoever. So she was present and she was there, but she had no clue what she was supposed to do because she would just zone out in those situations. So when I started addressing that with her, it started helping her in that situation. She's like, okay, maybe this isn't my favorite topic, but I know I need to be actively listening here regardless. So I was able to help her in situations like that, but not recognizing people when they sound annoyed or they look annoyed. So again, not picking up on those verbal or nonverbal cues rather. It's another one of the common ones. But it can lead into situations where bullying might arise in situations when they're not showing signs of sympathy. So those again are that's one of the bigger red flags that you can pick up on when there's a lack of sympathy for others, and it leads into bullying. And you've gotten calls that this child is constantly being sent to the principal's office because of they're bullying someone, they're fighting with someone. So that lack of sympathy actually, there was a study that showed that men who bully their classmates as children are 4 times as likely to have engaged in violence against female partners. So again, there we're seeing that at an early age when children lack those interpersonal skills or they haven't been fortified enough, it can lead towards a downward spiral, what eventually does lead to that domestic violence. And that's something that we're trying to revert, or we're trying to stop, rather trying to prevent, so it doesn't have to get to that level. But I have a video here I'm going to play, and we're going to dissect this afterwards. So I'm just going to have this playing for you real quick.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
So the first time I actually did this presentation and I played this video, it was at a Plano elementary school where I was presenting in front of parents, and I let them know it's like this video might be hard to watch just because in that section where the mother's asking to ignore the baby while the baby's trying to desperately get the mother's attention. It took a toll on these parents, but it helped them. Like the reason I wanted to show it is because um, he brings up a good point. There's three different outcomes that can come from parents either being involved, not being involved, and giving the opportunity for their child to recover from some of these situations. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I had some of those parents address it to where, but just because a child ends up in one of those bad situations, it doesn't mean it's the parent's fault. Because as one of those parents addressed it is, she told me that she was working two part-time jobs and one full-time job. She was constantly having to she had to leave the house, so her two children were constantly on their own, but it's not because she didn't want to be around them. She was a single parent. She was working so she could provide for them. So she was constantly out of the picture. And she was noticing that her children were being impacted by this. Her son and daughter were both getting in trouble at school. Their grades were dropping. And it hit her. It pretty much made her realize that it's not her doing something wrong because she felt guilty. She thought she was the one causing the harm, causing all this. And in situations like that, it's she had to do what she had to do to provide for her kids. But she was realizing, hey, my situation to push my family forward is also causing harm in that situation. So what she told me she did in that situation is she addressed it. She talked with her two teens and let them know, hey, I'm still here for you should you ever need anything. If if me not being here is causing an issue, let me know. I can try and cut back some hours. I can try and find something that pays more so I'm not away as much. But let me know what I can do to help you in that situation because I don't want, she didn't want either of her kids going just downward in a downward spiral and who knows, possibly end up in jail or worse because that's what she was worried about. So the way she was fixing that bad was by opening that line of communication because she said before that she really didn't have that line of communication with them. And I asked like, well, what did you see that what did you do that worked for you to actually open that line of communication? And one of the things she said was the dinner, like work, like sitting together at the dinner table, though a few times that she did have an opportunity to be home and be there with them. And we're going to talk about how important just having or how effective having dinner with your family or with your children, how effective it can be and how positive setting that is for them. So we'll talk about that here in a bit. But I just wanted to address with this video that there are parents that feel that way. It's like they feel guilty because they feel they're the root cause for their children's bad behavior. And at times, all it is they're missing that link of that communication because we saw in this video what happens when that baby isn't, when the parent isn't reciprocating the feelings back or just acknowledging the children's behavior, their cause for help or any of that. So it does cause negative behavior, but that can be fixed again with those interpersonal skills. And that's why they're important. It established that communication with the child, let them know that you care about them, that you want to be around them, you're just not ignoring them. So that's one of the reasons I really wanted to highlight this video here. But how do we improve interpersonal skills? First one on there, praising your child. Because again, usually it's always the negative that they hear. It's like you did this wrong, you did that wrong, but they don't hear the positive, and that positive reinforcement just has such a good impact on them. It helps build that continuous cycle of, you know what, my parents are proud of me, they're happy I'm doing this, so I'm gonna continue doing that. So it helps establish a positive field for them. Um, one of the other reasons, or one of the other ways you can improve interpersonal skills is by, this is where we're going to start touching a little bit on those family dinners, but giving each family member a small job during meal prep. And this doesn't mean you're going to have the 5-year-old set out the china for you, because the odds are that's going to end up badly. But in situations like that, you instead want to have, if you have younger children, you maybe want to give them disposable plates, disposable cups, so they can set up on the table, and so they can feel like they're part of this. Because when I was growing up, when it came to family dinners, I was either in my room or in the living room, and my mother really didn't request anything from me. It was just there. Dinner would be ready, and poof. I never had the opportunity, to help out, or I mean, that might have been on me too. I didn't ask to help, but if she had asked, I would have felt included in that situation, right? So I would have probably that would have probably opened the door. It's like, hey, what else do you need? And probably established communication, that open line of communication with me and my mother in a setting like that. But that's one way younger children can be involved in that situation. If there's teenagers involved and they're just a bit older, maybe asking them what they want to cook. Like, is there a recipe that they saw on YouTube or on Instagram or on Tasty, the Tasty page? They got so many good ones. But it might be that they saw a recipe there that they want to try. They don't know where to start, but letting them know, hey, do you want to try cooking sometime? Is there something? And that's most likely going to pique their interest to get them excited to actually want to try that. I have practice steps of a conversation. And I have a little section where we talk about shy kids. There are kids that just don't know how to start that line of communication. One way that's very effective for younger kids is role playing. Just being able to role play a conversation with them, let them know, show them how you would start a conversation in that setting. Because some of us are really, really good at that. Some of us, it just isn't that easy. We don't want to be put in that setting where we're going to be rejected or we're not equipped to start that conversation because we don't know how to. So being able to role play with them at an early age on how to start that conversation is really great practice for them. And it doesn't only have to be conversations. I mean, if there's some specific interpersonal skill that you're trying to work with, role playing is always a nice way to go about that. Practice personal space. This one was another extremely hard one with me and my niece, because she had no clue what the word was. She had no clue. And she wouldn't knock when she would come into my bedroom. She would jump in my bed. She would poke me and say, hey, uncle, are you up? Are you up? And I'm like, yes, Eileen, I am up now. But she couldn't grasp the concept. So what I started doing is I started taking the things she was doing and reflecting them back on her. So if we had a conversation, I would stand so close to her, and you would see her backing away. It's like, no, uncle, you're too close. And I can't. It still eludes me the name of the cartoon that she watched this example from, but she told me, no, uncle, you need to stay away. And she spread her arms and she did a whole circle around herself, and she's like, you need to stay that far back. I was like, and I'm like, why? And she's like, because this is my safe zone. This is me. Okay, so anything here, I need to feel safe. So that's how she was able to really put that visual effect into it. She would just put that arms out and have that circle, and she knew this is my safe zone. So I started using that with her. So I'm like, if she would rush in the mornings, and instead of jumping in the bed and poking me, it's like, uncle, are you up? She still wouldn't knock, so she would still barge in, but she would be next to my bed. And instead of poking me or anything, she would call out. It's like, hey, uncle, are you up? Are you awake? So we were slowly implementing that into personal space and teaching her that, to where it got to the point where we even started using a hula hoop. And I think I used a hula hoop example further down the line, but that's another thing you can use to use as a visual aid when it comes to teaching personal space. Use a hula hoop. And that caring for animals, plants, another basic way that you can show them, show that sympathy, caring for another, for something else, not just yourself, caring for your pet, making sure you're feeding them. Maybe it's a goldfish, letting them know when the goldfish needs to be fed, small little things like that, watering the plants. It helps improve those little skills little by little. And all of this, the more of them, I mean, last thing you want to do is bombard a young child or even a teen with a whole lot of different interpersonal skills where, you know, you need to check all of these, you need to perfect all of these. No, you don't want to overwhelm any child with any of that. So again, I can't stress enough that focus on the important skills, like focus on what you're trying to address first, what the main interpersonal skill that you're trying to focus on, and go with that one first instead of completely bombarding them with multiple ones. And practice with them. Again, there's the hula hoop one, but practice with them. It's those interpersonal skills don't happen overnight. They don't. And trust me, I know how hard it is trying to teach a young one these interpersonal skills. So there's a lot of patience that's required when it comes to these interpersonal skills. But one nice little activity that I had seen was the tossing a ball back and forth to engage in conversation. So we would practice a conversation and I would ask a question, I would toss the ball to her, and then she would answer the question. And then she would ask a question and she would toss the ball to me. So we were going back and forth. And then when I saw that, okay, she's picking up on conversation, she knows how to make a conversation flow. So I started asking her, hey, Celine, can you pick up on some of the verbal, like the nonverbal cues? Can you tell me when you think I'm not interested in this conversation? So she would toss the ball, we would carry on that conversation, and then she would say something and I would pull my phone out and pretend I was going through notifications or whatever. And she's like, there. It's like, you look bored with this conversation. So we would say, okay, so let's say I did find your conversation boring, but you were able to pick up on one of these verbal cues. What would you do in that situation? So she started realizing, okay, well, if you seem distracted, if you seem uninterested in the conversation, then it's probably the topic itself, maybe what she's talking about is something I'm not interested in. So she started figuring out, okay, if there's situations like that arise, maybe I can change the subject. Maybe I can ask you what you want to talk about. Is there something you want to discuss? So it was slowly but surely, small little activities like that where you can help them or you can help them pick up on social cues. You can help them practice those conversations and let them know how they go. And again, you can apply that to any of these interpersonal skills that you're trying to help them with them. But again, practice makes perfect. And as cliche as that sounds, but it really does work with teenagers, well, not just teenagers, but children in general. And then what can be done to improve social skills? Again, they won't come overnight. It's not just going to happen. That patience is required, but consistency is very important. Again, like just being constant when it comes to that situation. If you want to make sure one skill is complete, like it's not going to be again perfected overnight, but if you want to make sure there's some process being made, just continue repeating that process, continue repeating until you're able to see that, okay, they have picked up on this interpersonal skill. And once that happens, don't just go cold turkey and ignore it, but you can move on to another social skill, interpersonal skill that you're trying to focus on. But every now and then revert back to these interpersonal skills. It's like my dog. Like, I'm not comparing dogs to children, but my dog, I've taught her so many different tricks. I've taught her to shake hands, roll over, play dead, stand by my side, go between my legs, jumps, you name it. And every time I'm teaching her a new trick, I'll give her a treat. So that treat acts as that positive reinforcement for a child. And if I'm teaching a new trick that I know it's going to be complicated to my dog and she's struggling with it, I revert back to one of the older tricks that I know she knows already. Like, so if I want her to, let's say, run and fetch we'll go with that example. Fetch was one of the hard ones that I had to learn with her. So she was having a hard time grasping that. So again, I started reverting to lay down, to jump, to shake, things that she already knew. And it slowly we started making progress. Me and my dog started making progress in that aspect. And that's essentially what you're going to see with children. If they're struggling with a new social skill, there's always time to, like, you can revert back and practice one of the other skills that they're already, like, that they already nailed down or started nailed down, and give them that confidence again. Like, give them a nice little jolt, a boost of confidence, which is what you want to do with them. And it helps push them forward. It helps keep them from getting upset because they're not getting that or understanding, grasping that new social skill. So just being able to revert and reinforce it with positive reinforcement is always good to help children improve in those social skills. And I touched a little bit on how to help shy kids, but practice empowering them and using puppets. Again, that role playing, when you have a shy kid, a shy child, and you use puppets in that situation, it helps them address their feelings through the puppets, because now things don't seem as scary, because now it's not their feelings, it's the puppets' feelings. So they're going to be more open to talking about some of the things that they're personally going through, but addressing it through that puppet. And having a role play setting in that situation really helps those shy kids come out of their shell. And it helps, maybe you don't know what's wrong in that situation, what's troubling them, but that role play in that puppet setting can help bring some of those issues to the surface, where you can now that you know what's going on, you can help them, and you can help address those issues that are happening. Now, I was going to make this into a survey, and I was going to ask everyone, but just to save time, I'm going to ask I have the questions up there, and I'm going to tell you usually what I hear from parents. I ask them, it's like, what's the average age that a child receives their phone? And a lot of them was like, oh no, my child isn't getting a phone until they're in high school, or until they can pay for it. Answers like that. But here in the US, the average is 11 years old. In the United States, about 11 years of age is when a child gets their first cell phone. And I asked them, what factors into deciding that my child is old enough, or is it mature enough? What helps you decide as a parent when your child receives a phone? And when it comes down to it, a lot of the answers I get is, my child needs to be mature enough to handle that responsibility of a phone. Because the last thing you want to happen with that is them using those cell phones for bad. And when I'm talking about bad, I'm talking about for digital abuse, cyberbullying, that type of thing, where they're harassing their friends or other students through social media, through those applications. That's the last thing you want. And that's a concern that parents have, and rightfully so, because when I do these presentations again, and let's say I finished 5 minutes early, and the teacher says, all right, everybody, y'all can have free time. All the kids just drop down, their heads go down, and they all pull out either their cell phones, their tablets. So they constantly are connected online. And it puts them at risk of being cyberbullying or just digitally abused. So that's one concern that parents have when it comes to that. But I have a picture of Bill Gates here because, excuse me one second, because he actually didn't give his children access to phones until they were 14 years old, because that's when he felt, my child knows how to use this technology for good. They know the harm that can come from it, and we've talked about it and what I'm expecting. So he was adding limits and restrictions, what they could do, what they couldn't do. And Mark Cuban did the same thing with his 13-year-old daughter. He put limits on her phone, like where she couldn't use that phone after 10 p.m. on school days, where he restricted certain sites that she couldn't go to. So at the end of the day, no one can tell you as a parent what age your child should have a phone, but you make that decision when you feel that your child is responsible enough, or when you know that your child should have access to that phone. That's on the parent. I'm not here to tell anyone what that age is for that situation. But the reason I bring it up is because it does act as a technology barrier when you're having children texting constantly on social media, and just a conversation. When you're having conversation face to face, you don't sit on that conversation for 3 hours, leave this person on red, and give yourself time to actually think of the perfect reply to this conversation. No, and face to face, you have to reply then and there, because that's how a conversation works. But that texting and that technology acts as a hindrance, that barrier, because now they're not really practicing that conversation. They have time to think out what they're going to say. If they don't like what they're going to say, they just delete it and reword it until they like what they've written, and then they send it off. So it takes away from that practicing those interpersonal skills with people face to face. And at the same time, it does become addictive to teenagers too, who are constantly on social media, who they'll post a picture, they get a like, they get a comment, it starts releasing dopamine. So it makes them feel good about that situation, and it makes them continue want to post, want to be online, because they're getting that release of dopamine every time they get those comments or the notification pops up. So it really, some of the studies that I'd seen on this really slowly make the connection to substance use, and the same release you get from substance use, and how addictive that is. And it's the reason why some of these substance users continue to get high or continue to up their dosage. It's just because it makes you feel good at the end. And it's kind of the same thing with that social media. It becomes addictive to children, and they continue to want to do it. So they leave personal face-to-face conversations to the side. They're like, why bother with that when I can still do some of that online? I can still feel good about myself when I do it online. So again, it just acts as that barrier to keep them from practicing those interpersonal skills. Now, I want to touch on conversation starter tips. I probably ate too much time on these interpersonal skills at the beginning, but I'm going to touch on the main points for these presentations. And conversation starter tips, one of the best things you can do is have a family dinner with the children, because that opens the door to communication. And one of the things, especially right now with COVID-19, there a lot of students are still at home for summer school. The parents are like, unfortunately, some parents have been unemployed for a bit, so they're constantly at home with their kids there. But that's a good time to practice that dinner table and try and bring a positive reinforcement and start a conversation with children, because in a week there's 16 times that you can have family dinner together, 7 breakfasts, 7 dinners, and even more now, because now there's also 7 lunches available that y'all can have together. So there's constant different opportunities throughout the day where you can come together as a family. And it doesn't even have to be a full-blown 3-course meal. It doesn't even have to be home-cooked meal. It can be takeout for your child's favorite place, where you just sit down for a few minutes and just discuss a little bit of what's going on in the day, how they're feeling, what some of their concerns are with the situations maybe going on, just giving them something to open up about. Maybe it's those current events, maybe it's down the line. Are they concerned about what their school is going to look like, how classes in the fall are going to look like? You just want to open that door. And once you do, the last thing you want to do, if you've established that communication with them during dinner time, you don't want to bring up any of the negative. You don't want them to associate anything bad with that. You want them to make sure they're excited when they come to that dinner table, because it's going to be sharing back and forth. We're going to talk about good things, not like upsetting things when it comes to why did you fail your class? Why did you get an F in your last report card? You don't want to use that moment to scrutinize any child in that setting once you've established it. And just wanted to read what the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University had to say on the topic. Was kids and teens who share family dinners are 3 or more times per week are more likely to eat healthy, perform better academically, are less likely to engage in risky behavior, meaning substance use, alcohol, or sexual activity, and have better relationship with their parents. And that better relationship with their parents that comes from having those family dinner tables. Because when my parents would allow me to have one of my friends over, my friend would come over and my parents' demeanor would completely change. They were so much happier. They were excited that my friend was over. They would ask him questions. Hey, how are you doing? Like, how are things? And I would see another side of them that I usually don't see. And children, when they see that, when they get the opportunity to see that their parents are vulnerable, caring, also, if they're not used to that, but they see that when their friend comes over, it helps them make that connection that, hey, maybe my parent isn't hard all the time, isn't strict all the time. There is this other side to them. So it helps them see that and lets them know that my parents, human too, they have emotions as well in that aspect. But it helps those dinner tables help open up. No, I thought I moved the wrong slide. But those dinner tables, while being important, aren't the only way that you can establish those conversations with them, because there's no magic recipe, perfect scenario that you can set up for these kids or children to open up, because they'll most likely just happen organically. When they feel comfortable, they're going to open up about situations. They're going to talk when they want to talk. But if you give them as many different opportunities to engage in those conversations, that's when you'll most likely see results. I mean, it could happen when walking the dog, when they decide to finally open up. But yeah, there's, again, no secret one. This is what you need to do to get them to open up. Again, various different ways you can go about that. And one of the things we hear with teenagers is like parents saying, well, how do I get past the I'm fine? And that one is just engage their interests. Find out what they like about and ask about that. Even if you don't know what that band they're talking about that they want to go see in concert, if you don't know what that band is, even better for you, because now you can ask questions. You can ask about, well, what kind of music are they playing? It's like, where are they from? It's like, are they from here? Like, when's the last time they released a new album? So you can maybe get them an album, surprise them with that, and make a connection with the children. Now I was gonna make a little example with that, but I'm just gonna move forward a bit. And I probably have time just for probably this one more clip. So I'm just gonna play this clip for y'all real quick, because it's one of my favorite clips that I use with my niece when I was taking care of her. But this is one of the things I used with her.
But it's not easy. I know what I have to do, but going back means I'll have to face my past. I've been running from it for so long. Ow! Jeez, what was that for?
It doesn't matter. It's in the past.
Yeah, but it still hurts.
Oh, yes, the past can hurt. But the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it. Ah, you see?
So that's just, I really like that, because it's one of those teachable moments with my niece where I would let her know, just because, yeah, some of the things you've done in the past, we can always learn from our past. Even if we might beat ourselves up for it, it's a learning experience. And using Disney movies is one of the things that we did a lot. I did with her a lot, because I have an example here of a few of the different movies. You can find a message behind it, something you can help work with them when it comes to the interpersonal skills. Things like Frozen, again, one of her favorite ones. That one, when it comes right down to it, it focuses a lot on not bottling your emotions. And that's one thing you want to really address with these kids. You want to give them an emotional vocabulary to label their emotions, because eventually that's going to help them down the line when it helps to address conflict. They're going to be like, well, why am I in conflict today? Is it because I'm mad at someone, or am I just upset about the situation? Because if it's the latter, then I can just take some time to relax, drink some tea, go out, lay in a hammock. It gives them the opportunity to really make a connection between their emotions and what they're going through in that situation. Now, also, this little blue circle right here, the Studio Ghibli, that one has themes for teenagers. So it talks about topics like death as well. So it touches on these topics and it helps ease into those and open the door and to have those kind of conversations where maybe you don't know where to start. And even in The Lion King, you can touch on that as well. You can use that to touch on death with Mufasa's death. And you can just find little different segments from these movies that are readily available that you can use to help with teaching some of these interpersonal skills. Now, I know we had this webinar scheduled till 3, and I actually still had quite a bit to get through, but unfortunately, I'm not going to get there, but I'm going to leave a list of some of the resources for you and touch on them real quick. The family dinner project. So this one just touches a lot more on how to start conversation with children of all ages. It has activities that you can use with children of all ages and how to apply them. So it's a really good resource for that. I have Anxious Toddlers as well, where it has information to help children with various different topics. And there's also, they have, if you click on their link and go to their link, they have a YouTube series for children where they're speaking to the children directly. So there's videos for them, and I've looked over them. They have some really good different material on there. Tech safety, since we did touch on a little bit about digital abuse and cyberbullying and all that. Tech safety is an application available both on Android and on Apple, where it can help you with situations like that. Should a stalking situation, should a cyberbullying situation arise, it helps you figure out how to address that situation. But since we're pretty much out of time, if anyone has any questions, any concerns, I'll be more than happy to try and address those for you. But if there's no any other questions, I just want to give you out a reminder that once this closes out, once the webinar closes out, there should be a survey that pops up for those of you that need CEUs. Then you can just fill out and we'll get those taken care of as soon as we receive them. But aside from that, if there's no other questions, thank y'all so much for being here.